listen to any comments you might have. But yeah.
That was very moving, and I'm sure I'm far from the only one who really enjoyed it. Who would like to ask the first question? And if you use the hands up thing, then I'll get you in the right order. Peter, lovely to hear from you.
For the splendid talk. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but would you venture to tell us what you think about what's your final conclusion about the famous controversial militia photograph? It sounds to me from what you're saying that it's very likely that the man was genuinely killed, but it was at a different location than is generally believed.
Yes, that's just going by what the evidence I've been able to find online and in the few books and things I've had, Peter. But I still think it's a very thin line. You know, I tend to go along with the story that they were fooling around. And, you know, I've not heard or read of anyone coming forward to discredit the theory that there could have been a lone sniper, two lone snipers that picked off two of those men. It has been, I think, recorded that the guy, Federico Burrell Garcia, was actually killed on that day, but I don't think there's been any identification of a second man. So I think, you know, I'm leaning towards the idea that they were killed while they were just going through maneuvers for the benefit of the camera. But I still think, you know, there's vital information missing to give us a conclusive answer, I think. You know, obviously the homicide detectives, what he thought about it is interesting. And I guess it's a very valid point if you really think about it and put yourself in that position. I'm not asking you to fall backwards, Peter, but you know, it's still very much an open case, I think.
Thank you. Who would like to ask the next question? Okay. Well, one of the things you showed us was the people going to who ended up in Argel-sur-Mer. Another one of those camps was over between Pau and the Pyrenees, in a place called Gers.
Yeah.
If you're ever down in that area, I would really recommend going there. After the war, people planted trees to try and wipe it out. And about, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, the local mayor thought this was wrong. And he raised money from all sorts of places and put in a piece of imitation rail to symbolize what happened there.
Yeah.
It was after the Civil War, people were dispersed mostly to go and fight in the Battle of the Marne. Of course, the Vichy regime collected Jewish people for a one-way trip to Poland, and they've restored the cemetery, which has some people who'd come out of Spain, but a lot of people from Jewish families, including, tragically, lots of babies born and died on the same day. We visited it because Liz's father was one of those people interred after the war, and each hut was marked out, and a couple of huts were restored to look like that. So Liz was able to see within a couple of huts worth exactly where her father had been interred.
Yeah. I've always meant to ask you, Quentin, a few years ago, me and my wife went to Figueres to see the home of Salvador Dali. And while I was there, I'd hoped to go and find the barracks that Orwell I think, did his basic training in. Was it there? That's where he began when he first went to Spain. I was wondering if it was still standing. Would I have found anything if
Well,
we'd
I
have
think
had the time to go there?
Well, I think his basic training was done at the Lenin barracks, which isn't
Yeah,
there anymore in Barcelona.
yeah, yeah. But I know he references
Yeah,
arriving in Figueres
yes. Well, Figueres
at
is at
some
the
point.
border, of course.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know is the straightforward answer to that.
yeah.
Les, what would you like to ask?
Hello,
Thank you
Les.
very much. A great discussion. Thank you, Ron. Now, we know that Orwell talked about the quality of Nazi propaganda, particularly radio broadcast propaganda, and he criticised British documentary films of the war period. Did the Nazis have any photographers remaining of quality like Robert Capa or John Hartfield or any of these others who became anti-Nazi refugees? They had what's the name, the film director Riefenstahl, but did they have any top quality photographers remaining, rivals to Capa?
Off the top of my head, Les, I can't really answer. Obviously, I'm very familiar with Leni Riefenstahl's work. She's another photographer I've got many books on. And obviously, another very famous photographer from the Second World War was the Russian photographer Vasily Grossman. I'm sure you've heard of. I know Peter Davison did a talk about him at one time. But other German photographers, I cannot really say, Les. It's an interesting thing. Maybe I should something worth looking into.
Well, I mean, the Germans published their own high-quality magazine called Signal,
yes,
which you can. It's out of print at the moment, but there was a 3-volume selected reprint from it because they published it in multiple languages, including English, and it was a rival to Life and Picture Post in the neutral countries. So photography is not just a record; it was a major propaganda tool. I'm not sure if you go into it in your book on the BBC and propaganda, because of course it wouldn't have played as big an element. But
no, I mean, I would be very surprised if it wasn't an avenue worth pursuing, Les, because a lot of the best cameras around back then were German made. Capa took his Leica everywhere. He swore by it.
And when you see the movie news of Hitler arriving anywhere, there's not only the camera taking the picture of Hitler, but you can see another 5 or 6 cameramen on the ground in shot. So it was very important as a part of the whole what's the word?
Weltanschauung? Yeah. Because I remember when Riefenstahl made those films like Triumph of the Will, it was an enormous undertaking. The setup was massive.
We don't have anyone else with a hand up, so if you don't mind, I'll make a second point while Professor Stansky is online. I've just read an older collection of essays edited by Professor Stansky in 1983 called On 1984, which includes an essay by Alex Comfort, who was an opponent of Orwell over pacifism. And in that essay, Comfort says, I only met Orwell once. It was about the time that he'd published 1984. And I thought Orwell was very ill at that time. And looking at the other evidence that goes in there, Comfort doesn't mean 1984. He means Animal Farm. And I think this ties up with this idea of where is the photograph of Robert Capa taken. Even people who should have paid attention to facts can sometimes let things slip. And they say Animal Farm, or they may say 1984 when they mean Animal Farm. And it's a simple error, and yet it could mislead a lot of people.
Yeah, it can throw a lot of people into confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just one other thing while I'm on here. I'll just take you through. This is the full monograph of Capa's work, and you can get these. You can pick these up for around about 30 quid online. It's an excellent book. It's about 560 odd pages, but it's Capa's whole career. It's a wonderful book to keep on your coffee table. And here we see our famous GI in the Surf on the front. It's quite heavy. Even if you don't read it, it's useful for standing on to get things off the top shelf. But I just thought I'd show you that. And then, of course, as well, we have our, if I can find it, yes, in his own words, slightly out of focus, Robert Capa actually wrote his own account of his career and how he took some of his images.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
Are we done then, Quentin?
Peter, I think, would like to say something, and then I think, yes.
Oh, yeah, just maybe somehow largely irrelevant coincidences. And unfortunately, I've forgotten his name. But he came to talk to my students. It was a Stanford faculty member who identified himself as he'd been on D-Day, and apparently he's one of the major figures.
The soldier in the surf
itself.
Yeah.
Alas, it was now quite a few years ago. I can't remember his name, but I like those coincidences. And then I've just recently, I don't think he's with us at this meeting. Richard Keeble just wrote me about the Alex Comfort essay. This was a symposium, a collection of essays by Stanford-connected people in that symposium, and then a book in took place in 1983. And Comfort had he had a clinical appointment for some reason at the Stanford Medical School, but I don't think he came to the symposium, and I think he was living in Los Angeles. But obviously, he had already published The Joy of Sex, so he was quite a well-known figure. And Richard was interested in acquiring the book, and he said he couldn't find it. I don't have any copies left, but if anybody's interested in that collection, which I think is a very Ian Watt and the Nobel Prize winning economist Ken Arrow, and various other, Gordon Craig, various other people affiliated with Stanford are on the symposium. And if anybody's interested in acquiring it, it's available on the, apparently it's not available on the UK Amazon, but I think it's quite easy. And Richard told me that he'd acquired a copy. If you go to the US Amazon, there are copies of this collection available, now published, of course, many years ago, if anybody's interested in acquiring it.
Thank you,
I'm
Peter.
sorry, Quentin, but presumably Anna Funder, she's going to, and I think it's a very, I'm literally in the middle of reading it, and I think it's a very, well, how can I put it? Deeply irritating, but also, and lots of errors and made up dialogue. But you know, in a way, also quite a fascinating book, and maybe she's fearful that she would be too attacked if she came.
She writes very fluently, and her previous book, Stasiland and Everything I Am, I thought were excellent books. But I now wonder, you know, what somebody who knew more about those subjects might find to fault with it.
I don't know if Sylvia wants to say anything about that, although it's not our immediate topic.
Yes.
You know, no, Eileen is not neglected, but we don't want to get into that discussion right now, presumably.
Well, yeah. I mean, all I would say is that I was asked by Gene Seaton and Bill Hamilton to document the errors between us that we could find, which includes some items that Ariana Banks, who's Celia Kerwin's daughter, says are, I mean, if Celia was alive, Anna would be facing a libel action.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Because Celia never had sex with him. So to suggest that Kessler would say, "Oh, Orwell looks a bit miserable when after his journey, please go to bed with him," is
Yeah.
Well, I'll say no more. Sylvia, please.
Sylvia, hello.
So I'm also halfway through that book, so parts of it are beautifully written, I have to say. You know, she has quite a style, but I'm making copious notes along with other people of factual errors that I find, as well as times I think she's using my research without crediting me, just going back to the original researcher instead of crediting the fact that I found that person before she did, probably. But that's kind of minor, I suppose. But my book is getting mentioned often, so that's a good side of it, I guess.
Definitely.
Well, the
Finally going to get distributed here in Canada and in the States, where it hadn't been before. So Unbound has decided to distribute it, I think, because of all of this. But I wanted to ask Peter really about the that article by Comfort in your book. So I did find I could order not me in Canada, but my son in the States is ordering me a copy, and I should get it in 7 to 21 business days. So that's quite a while from now. But Richard Keeble said that one of the quotes he says is quite a psychological thing that Orwell said, and I can't quite remember the whole of it, but the end of it was that Big Brother acted as a superego. And if it's only about Animal Farm, that quote doesn't make sense, Peter. Or whoever.
I haven't had a chance to reread the essay, and I know that was the quotation that Richard was particularly interested in. But presumably it's what Comfort wrote. I mean, not what I wrote, but what Comfort wrote in an essay. But I haven't reread the essay. And you know, it was published. The book was published in well, I don't know if it was actually published.
40 years ago.
Was in '83, but it wasn't published till '80. It may not have been published till '84. It was published locally by a Stanford series, and then a commercial publisher picked it up. John Wiley republished it.
Les thought that it would refer to Animal Farm instead of 1984. I didn't understand why he thought that.
No, I don't know.
Run upstairs and get my copy.
He's left us, and you can't ask.
There's
a biography of him, or the study of him that I reviewed, I think for the Orwell studies. But as far as I remember, there's no. It was, of course, quite a while ago, or some time ago. I don't remember any discussion of that.
Well, Les is back. He's got the book. So you might get an answer now, Sylvia.
Big Brother is not in Animal Farm. I don't know. We'll see. But as some of you know, I'm thinking of or trying to work on an article saying that Orwell was educated psychologically by Eileen, who was studying for the master's in psychology. And I have a quote by Orwell to somebody in a letter saying he doesn't really respect psychology, and he makes fun of it in Aspidistra, which is just about the time he's met Eileen. And all of a sudden he's using superego and things like that.
Well, I think probably Aspidistra started before they met. I think the first one where she was really involved, obviously, was Coming Up for Air.
Yes, which has a change in his approach for sure.
Yeah. Les, you have something to add, and then we'll come to you, Felicia Nemo.
Okay, well, this is the reference where Alex Comfort gets it wrong. Page 17. I counted Orwell as a friend, but he was a friend by post, for I met him only once in a pub in Bermondsey, soon after he had published 1984, and I had published The Powerhouse. I was a resident medical officer at the Royal Waterloo Hospital, and I was shocked to see how ill he looked. We talk about his book, which I took to be a political statement against dictatorship. His reply was astonishing, that it was, but that the model in his mind was also that of the neurotic's internal thought police, with Big Brother as the superego. Now, the book The Powerhouse came out in 1944, and Orwell wouldn't have met anybody in a pub in 1949 after he'd published The Road to 1984 because he was too ill. Comfort is confusing two books, and I don't see how Orwell would have talked about Animal Farm and talked about in neurotics, internal thought police, and superego. I think he's imagined that.
What?
So when your copy arrives, this is, as Professor Stansky said, this is an absolutely brilliant collection. It's got William Abrahams and Peter Stansky in it, but it's also got Paul Ehrlich, the population economist, Ian Watt, the Martin Eslin. It's got Robert Conquest, and it's got Philip Zimbardo, the guy who did the Stanford prison experiment.
Yes.
An absolutely brilliant collection, and I'm glad I picked up a copy. But yes, that what Comfort says there is a hopeless mismatch. It can't be what Orwell said at the time. They must have met in 1944, and possibly he would have talked about superego because he would have heard some of that from people like Eileen. But I mean, he wouldn't have talked about the thought police at the time because he hadn't written the book then.
How would you relate superego to Animal Farm?
I wouldn't. I think Comfort has what's the word where you make things up and fill them in?
I'm not going to believe that. I believe.
He's filled the gaps in his mind long after the event. But as Professor Stansky said, the copyright on that article is interesting because it says at the end of it, copyright Books and Broadcasts Inc. So this was probably, as Professor Stansky said, a talk which Alex Comfort, who was associated with Stanford at the time, had actually given somewhere else and had reprinted, unfortunately, without it being fact-checked.
So you're saying Alex Comfort used those words in a lecture?
It sounds like it, or a talk, yes. Yeah, when your copy arrives, you'll find it.
Right, I think we've beaten that one to death.
Sorry, I've held
Felicia has
up.
been very, very patient, waiting to speak to us.
Thank you. You may have to be patient with me because am I unmuted?
You're unmuted, but all we can see is your cat.
Yes, isn't that nice? My Zoom has been fading in and out, so it's possible that what I'm saying has been said before or is not really relevant, but I believe there has been some discussion of inaccuracies in Anna Furter's book, and I really want to call attention to the fact that she speaks of the 3 minutes hate. I really gasped when I read that.
Well, she had him born in Burma, and she confused her mother's ancestry around Mulmine in Burma with her father's his occupation in India. I mean, just riddled with errors.
3 minutes hate. I mean, that's just really astonishing.
and it's been edited 3 times because she had an Australian editor for that edition, an English editor for ours, and an American one for yours.
Yeah.
Anyway, there we are. Well, I'm glad you've spoken, because it gives me the opportunity to remind everybody that Felicity Nemu will be giving next month's George Talk on the 15th of October. You announce it yourself, Felicity Nemu.
It's going to be called either the 20th century's most underrated novel, or possibly teaching the 20th century's most underrated novel. I have an article forthcoming in the MLA anthology on Orwell about teaching Orwell, which is about that. And in case you can guess what I think the 20th century's most underrated novel is, well, I won't tell you. Come and see.
Right. Sylvia.
I'd say one more thing. I forgot to thank Ron. I really enjoyed his presentation. It was excellent. And
I'm glad you enjoyed it, Sylvia.
you kind of got left out of the conversation when we got into this other stuff. So I want to be sure you know, I really enjoyed it. I'm sure we all did.
Thank you, Sylvia. I was an interested listener.
Well, I think one of the things I love about these George Talks is that the discussions afterwards range over all sorts of things and generate a lot of interest for all of us. Well, can we thank Ron again, and thank you all those who've stimulated all this discussion. It's been a good evening, and I, for one, am heading for the television to watch the rugby.
Australia lost.
Yeah.
Yes, that's great news, isn't it?
Really?
Any Australians?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very
Right.
much,
Thank
Ron.
you.
Okay,
Bye,
thank you
everybody.
very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Quentin.
Thank you.